family. Started working for the Animal Control Department in 2018. Since then, she completed the Animal Control Academy at the Martin Humane Society, and she also completed the Arrest and Control module at Butte College. Molly has been a model employee since day one. She's proactive, reliable, consistently asks our patrol officers if they need help with animal control related business, and she offers her knowledge and assistance. Her peers say that she always has a great attitude and is passionate with her role as an animal control officer. They've also said that she is very knowledgeable. She's the go-to person for any animal related questions that the officers might have. And recently, last year, Molly had an opportunity due to COVID, believe it or not, and she stepped up to perform a role as a supervisor. She did an outstanding job, taking on many leadership roles and dealing with the daily business of the animal control shelter, purchasing, and budget responsibilities. Molly loves what she does and it shows. She's very deserving of this award, and congratulations. Thank you. And it's always especially important for us to recognize our volunteers because they do so much to support our police department, from the daily operations to helping in the office to going out and assisting with traffic control and disaster response. And this year we get to honor volunteer Doug Runkle. Congratulations. Now, I hope I have all these facts right because we have a lot of history with Doug. So I'm told that Doug has lived in Paradise since 2004, and this owes some credit to your wife. He's been married for 55 years. They have 2 grown children and 4 grandchildren. A little bit about Doug. He became a volunteer in 2008, and he's been with us for 14 plus years now. Quite an accomplishment. Doug does a lot as a volunteer. He's a patrol volunteer, traffic disaster volunteer, and as the patrol volunteer, he conducts vacation house checks for people within our community. He's called out to traffic accidents, incidents needing roads closed, and general assistance in the field. He's always more than willing, and actually will get mad at us if we don't call him out often enough. So he's always reminding us that he's here to be called out, and he coordinates the response to those in-field operations. Doug's extremely reliable. He's taken on a lot of responsibility. Doug always answers his phone, is ready to come in for any event, rain or snow. He's always been very involved throughout his time as a volunteer, and he is a proven leader amongst his peers. He's trained many new incoming VIPs, and we're lucky and grateful to have you. Doug loves his community, and it shows through the work that he does here at the department, and we appreciate you very much. Another one for you?
Here.
Okay, we don't know where to look.
Here first.
Here first. That's right. Way to take it.
All right, thank you.
Cover my face up on
Of the year, and we select 2, and our PASH is the Paradise Animal Shelter Helpers that help do a lot of things around our animal control shelter, from socializing the dog. And then it temporarily closed due to COVID, when the shelter reopened to the public and throughout any other volunteer in the past year. She loves to socialize the dogs so that they're comfortable with their potential new. Elizabeth also participated in the Gold Nugget Parade and at the Johnny Appleseed event, helping and recruiting new volunteers. And our second PASH volunteer of the year is Ray Folks. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So Ray's been a volunteer for many years, assisting at the animal shelter. Every Saturday, Ray exercises all the dogs at the shelter, even when the dogs and socializing them makes them more adoptable. So this is a very important role. Ray is also proactive and always asks if there's anything else he can do around the shelter to help. He's done repairs and helps with tasks like sweeping the walkways and emptying the trashes so that our facility is presentable to the public. What Ray does helps the animal control officers. Appreciate all that you do.
Rick,
Take your mask off.
that's for him.
All right, so this next recognition is a little special, and Mayor Crowder has agreed to help me with this, so I'm going to allow him to read a proclamation.
Thank you, Aaron. So, whereas Karen Horn continues to serve the community of Paradise as a member of the VIPS after over 20 years of service, and whereas Karen Horn has served on the VIPS Advisory Committee for over 10 years after she was appointed by her peers, and whereas Karen Horn has volunteered for over 8,100 hours of VIPS services, and whereas the Town Council of the Town of Paradise service of the town with no compensation. Whereas Karen Horn has generously donated her time and energy for the public good and performed her duties as a VIPS member with thoughtfulness and professionalism. Now therefore, I, Steve Crowder, Mayor of the Town of Paradise, do hereby recognize and express appreciation to Karen Horn for her many years of dedicated service to the Town of Paradise this 8th day of February 2022. Karen, you want to come up?
Absolutely outstanding. Steve, thank you. You did a great job reading that proclamation. Oh, you're not done yet. You're gonna stay up here. It's a wonderful proclamation. I just have a few things to add on. Karen, you have been here very long at the front office, and she's always willing to take on any tasks that we need help with. Karen also takes on the role during incidents to coordinate the response of other volunteers and for tracking all the related paperwork to that. She's a definite leader in this group of volunteers and a huge part of keeping our organization running smoothly. So the guide all these years. Karen has contributed so much to our department, and we are very thankful for her dedication and service. So congratulations. That's how we got you here. Thank you, Council, for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chief.
Karen Horn, when we came to town and opened our business, we weren't even open yet, and there was a lady rapping on our door. So, item 1F.
I'll try to keep this short. Said that he would give me a pay raise. Do this for a great police department. If you were to calculate the $1,839, we're broke up into separate entities within the out. We go through parking lots, we go through by schools, by doing things that we can do without being sworn officers. We have a traffic and disaster group that Eric talked about, comes out for trees down, traffic accidents, any type of disasters. And she and her group respond to any requests. People come to the front counter, need something, they take care of them. We also have one person that's 7 rolled fingerprints this past year, and that would have cost the town to have a paid employee do it. Would have cost them $2,570. As you know, you see us out there at Special Half Fair, Butte County Motorcycle Run, and dozens of others. I won't go through all of them. I'll knock it off. So we're hoping to be able to recruit as soon as the COVID restrictions are lifted enough. We're all ready to go. We need some more help. We need to get active VIPs. So things are quite different for all of us. Really, that summarizes what I have to say.
Thank you for all you do. So, item 1G of a presentation by Research Conservation District and local private burn association.
Real quick here. Compete.
I don't blame them.
Don't take it personally.
Or take it personally.
Yes, no, not at all. What led up to this presentation tonight that I've requested for you folks to see, both me, I can tell you that outside of the town of Paradise, there's been some legislation that's changed in the state of California that's allowed private landowners to more actively participate in burning their properties and successfully completing these burns outside of the town in the county area. So tonight Wolfie's going to give you that presentation, and what Kevin and I are looking for is some direction from you, a future council meeting for staff to come back and consider this and options.
Hi, Town of Paradise Town Council. Thanks for having me. My name's Wolfie Rugel. I work for the Butte County Resource Conservation District based down in Oroville, and do a little bit about what we do. And we're just getting started, but we hope to bring good fire to a lot of folks' lands and help people get more comfortable with fire and using it in a good way. I wanted to educate how the permits that are available to Paradise residents compare to those available for folks who live in the rest of Butte County, unincorporated Butte County. They're pretty similar, except that in the rest of Butte County, people don't pay for their burn permits. And it's just like outside of Paradise. And then there's permits for waste from limbs, vine, and bushes, and wood waste. So slash, I interpret that to mean like leaves and needles. It's not explicitly stated that a resident could use this for a broadcast burn, which is, if I were to, on a good day when the conditions were right, if I were to light the fuel on the ground and just kind of let that fire walk along and do work for me, that would be a broadcast burn. So I interpret that language to mean a broadcast burn when you talk about the fuel reduction permits, but that might not be what everybody in Paradise looks at and sees. I'm not sure. So if you're a resident who wants to put fire to work for you in a good way, earlier today I could think of 4 ways to put good fire on your land, but then I thought of a 5th way, so there's 5 ways that I'll talk about just very quickly. The first one is that in most places in California, it's theoretically possible to have CAL FIRE come and do it for you, which is far and away what most landowners I talk to would prefer. CAL FIRE, if you have a strategic piece of land and it's big enough and it's definitely in the public safety interest to burn that, and it's easy for CAL FIRE to get there, like if you're a ranch owner or something, CAL FIRE will come, burn that land, do a great job, assume all the liability, pay all the costs. It's awesome. You'll be waiting for it for a while. But it's a great service, the CAL FIRE VMP, but it's just not available to the average landowner. It's something that if you're very fortunate and you're a large rancher or timberland owner, you're able to take advantage of. If you want to put good fire on the ground and take care of the hazardous fuels on your property, and you don't really want to do it yourself, but you do still want to be able to call the shots and have some say about what goes on, you can pay for it. You can hire a private burn boss. These individuals are very hard to find. They're highly qualified and highly in demand. But if you can find one and you can afford it, that burn boss will take on your liability, will also do a great job cleaning up whatever hazardous fuels issue you have on your land. So that's an option. Again, it's not available to everyone. You can also just implement a broadcast burn on your own land. It's your right. I would say in many parts of fire-adapted California, if you have a hazardous fuels issue on your land, it's also your responsibility to take care of that one way or another, and fire is in many cases the most cost-effective or the only feasible way to do it. This is a picture taken at a broadcast burn in Forest Ranch. This guy is, he's just wearing long-sleeved natural fiber clothing and a ball cap. But it's fire resistant enough for him to do his job. He's got a burn drip torch in one hand, tool in the other, and he's watching that fire carefully, and he's selected the right day for it so that that fire can do good work for him. When you do this yourself, you retain the liability, but With a well-chosen burn window and a well-designed burn plan, a lot of landowners are comfortable doing that and do a really good job burning safely. The fourth option is that you can call on your local prescribed burn association. It's nothing fancy and doesn't really change the rights or responsibilities that you have, but it's just a bunch of neighbors who've gotten together and decided, hey, we want to help each other learn and we want to all take our fire skills to the next level. This isn't something that most people are comfortable doing on their own, nor should they be if they don't have experience. But when we all get together, we can organize trainings, we can learn about fire weather, we can buy a lot of tools that we couldn't afford on our own, and we can share them. We've done 10 prescribed burns across Butte County so far as a burn association. People have contributed about 1,500 volunteer hours to underburning about 55 or 60 acres across Cohasset and Forest Ranch. It's a great time. It's literally ages 9 to 92. And it's not just doing good work in the forest, it's also a way to, without getting too flowery, it's a way to try and heal your relationship with fire. Fire can be a very destructive force, but fire is not going away. Fire is something that humans have managed in these woods for a very, very long time, and fire makes us human. The fifth way is that here in Butte County, we have all these great hybrid options. We have all kinds of great crews that are blossoming, from like the Big Chico Creek Ecological Reserve crew. The Mechoopda tribe has a crew now that you can hire. Different neighborhoods are kind of developing these little nuclei of really skilled burners. So private people can partner with nonprofits and get a lot of work done. We can be creative and find new ways to put good fire on the ground. I won't go into all this, but landowners often cite liability and lack of knowledge as their two biggest barriers to putting good fire on the ground the way that they'd like to. A well thought out burn with a good burn plan is really the best way to reduce your liability, and that's something that your neighbors and the Prescribed Burn Association can help with. I love this picture because it just reminds us that before fire was something that ruined all of our lives, it was something that brought us together, and it can be that again. I'm often told by experts that I should not talk about prescribed fire in communities that have experienced traumatic fires because people won't want to hear it, they'll be closed to it. I've found the opposite. Immediately after the Campfire, the RCD did a survey of landowners who had been both directly and indirectly affected by the Campfire and asked them what kind of services they wanted the RCD to provide. Reforestation was number one at 80%, but help with prescribed fire came in at 70%. Survey, about 156 people, 159 people in the town of Paradise were asked, would they support low-intensity prescribed burns conducted by fire professionals for the management of invasive plants and to reduce hazardous fire fuels right here in town. 77% said absolutely. An additional 18% said, hey, I need more information. That only leaves a very small fraction who said no. So people are open to fire doing good work in the town. These are some fun shots from past burns that we've done. It's really all about burning with the family and making fire into something that can be positive. Again, it's nothing formal. People can burn on their own or with a prescribed burn association. They still have the same rights. Here's some contact information if you'd ever like to reach out or more information. And if that left you with any questions, I'm happy to try to tackle them. Thank you.
A lot of questions. I'm just going to go on record saying I like this. I think it's a way for us to, when they see smoke, they get very concerned. So we just need to do this right. But I guess for me, the biggest thing is we can do this in town and be very successful with it, but we've got to get the county coming as it did before from some other place, and it's coming with a vengeance. And there's been nothing done in the county. So that's my My concern is, are we, and that's where our biggest issue. And we're running into insurance issues with people building homes and not able to get insurance. So this is huge. I think it's great. I hope we can move forward with something like this. We need it. It does a great job. When I've seen it done right, man, it does a great job. So it wasn't a question, but it's
I
more
didn't
of me
mind.
rambling. So I appreciate what you're bringing up.
Thank you.
Now, I'm curious, people could be utilized in all of, like in the county and here in the town, to, like a supervisor, I don't know if anybody's reached out to them, I don't know if it's just some stuff,
I agree.
mean, managed, of course, chief. Just a thought.
I agree, yeah.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
She has a card.
I have a card on this item from John Romelia.
Okay.
Good evening. I was many years burn between 5 and 10,000 acres a year. It works. Right now, we are at the opportune time. Prescribed burning is something maybe you go back every 5 years and do it to keep things from growing back up again. And we will support this any way we can, including volunteer time of our personnel and equipment. Thank you.
So, item 1H, we have a presentation, an update from PID by Tanya Dale.
Hi, everybody. Just real briefly, Advisory Council back, what we called it back in 1978 and 79. So it's a real joy to be here tonight. I never thought I'd see our town doing the volunteering that they've done. And as a longtime resident of this community, I know that your recognition of that, there are also dozens of other people doing similar things, and that's what's going to make us raising those people. I'm here tonight on behalf of Paradise Irrigation District. You got me instead of Mickey, who would know a lot more than I do, but Mickey was being named to staff as well as the town council, and most importantly, all of the people who want to return to Paradise, who already live in Paradise, or who are thinking about making a home in Paradise. Happening right now. But what's kind of interesting is those changes are changes that are restoring us to the way we used to be. So PI people, obviously not a town in those days, and the people got together and they said, we need some water. We need a water source. If you look over at Forest Ranch right now, they don't have a central water source. And later on it became for the residents to live here and to drink the water. In 1934, we were delivering water in big redwood pipes. And I know Cass took the water that they needed, but those redwood pipes began leaking and leaking. So in 1934, PID began metering for water. And until the Campfire, we metered for water. Pretty much the goal of what we want. With the Campfire, we have no meters anymore. The whole metering system was destroyed. It's not only the meters themselves, but it's all the sending system that goes and sends water for that same flat fee we were prior to the fire, but no quantity charge. And what's really puzzling right now is that right now that water is going somewhere. We know that there are a lot of residents who are just letting it run. We also know we still have some leaks in the system. We're restoring water is going so that we can plan ahead for future pipeline construction. 2 is that we need to restore ourselves back to making the district be able to be financially sustainable. California requires it, and it will require all water districts to be charging for consumption charges prior to 2025. So we've got to do it. Right now, PID, we have the metering. We're starting right now in zones throughout the district, and you may be aware that we elected by your zone or your district that you are represented by. It's for efficiency's sake where we have the most people initially. So, and we're starting from the north part of the district and running it south most typically. We began in installation includes not only putting the metering in, but making it part of the system that feeds back for the information as well as installation of the state-required, those little U-shaped backflow, are going to be getting meters. That area will receive a letter from PID that'll tell them approximately what date that will happen. When we install the meters, your water will not be off longer than 15. The customer's meter is installed, they will go back to being charged for consumption charges. So as the metering goes through the system, we will restore based on a billing of a monthly billing, but 2 months go together, again, for most efficiency. Right now, currently, PID residential customers on the active rate pay $42, correspond to anything you know, but a unit is 748 gallons. So and we charge you $1.61 for that unit. That is the same charge that we were charging back in 2018, 3 years ago. So it's the same. Paying for flat water usage right now and going up into it will increase by $5 to $10 a month, unless you have a huge garden. We talked to a Paradise Garden member, we looked at a month increase because of the consumption. But again, it's the same charges that were in place prior to the fire. You can monitor, we're encouraging our customers to monitor the app, or it was on your computer, you can go in. What I liked is that we were able to see if you had a water leak that came through while maybe you were on vacation visiting somebody at Christmas, you would see that water leak and you could be notified of it and have a neighbor turn off your water right. So we encourage people to download Drop Counter. And Drop Counter, if you're looking on the Android or the Apple app, it's spelled really weird. I do the newsletters and I always get people saying, you spelled that wrong. It's DR. People who are on the CARE program for PG&E, their CARE discount program, will receive a $10 a month discount on all of their water use. They just have to apply to the Campfire as well. So basically, we're on a process of moving ourselves back to what we were before the fire, at the same rates before the fire. If you have any questions, we have a great customers, their homes, get back into Paradise and everything. And I would encourage you to call. I'd encourage you, if you know anybody, call PID and they'll help you get new service. Any questions to metering? I have essential tremor. I'm not really nervous, okay? I have essential tremor. It's been a bad day for me with the town. And as I said, being a longtime resident, it is so encouraging to see the concept of thriving, not just surviving up here. I'm really encouraged with it.
Okay, 1J is Long-Term Recovery Plan by Colette Curtis.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you. As you'll recall, slide please. As you'll recall, can you take it? Here, can I take it? Okay. Much more efficient this way. Oop.
We're done.
And at the end. Any questions? Super clear, right? Okay, I don't have the mouse. Okay. We'll get to the questions at the end. I'm sure you'll have so many. Okay, great. So we will begin. Okay, so as you'll recall, back in 2019, right after the fire, we undertook a long-term recovery plan process to identify projects that we would need in going into recovery. With a disaster of this scope, we knew that we would have to have a strategy moving forward, even though we knew at that time there was a lot we had to learn. We knew there was so much we did not know yet. We needed to have time to kind of soak all of that in, but also have a strategy as in mind. We began this long-term recovery plan update, or this process, back in 2019. We began in February of that year. We had a lot of community input. We had, as you'll recall, many community meetings. There were large gatherings at the CMA Church. We had thousands and thousands of people that took part in that. This plan was generously funded by the Beat Strong Fund through North Valley Community Foundation, and questions for him also at the end.
Hey, Barry.
Hi there. How y'all doing? And they did an absolutely wonderful job in reaching out to our community and helping us facilitate this process in a time of trauma for all of us. And so through that process, we came up with about 40 recovery projects that we as a community decided were where we wanted to put be in charge of those projects as we understood them at the time in 2019. To date, we have utilized that plan every single day as staff members. That is our guiding document and so at your guidance, we have started the process to update that plan now that we feel that we've gained a lot of knowledge over the last 3 years, and it's time to kind of go in and refine some of that. Paradise, of course, is in charge of this plan. We are directing this plan. UDA is facilitating this for us. And then we're gaining all of this input from our community organizations, from our residents. Those are our stakeholders. So the goals of this update are to measure our progress, right? We really want to see how far we have come in 3 years and see what have we accomplished, what do we still need to accomplish, where do we need to go. This is a great opportunity to educate and inform our residents and those outside Paradise what we have been working on and the progress that we have made. Also, this is a great opportunity for our community to things that maybe will alter what this plan's direction is. So we think it's time to get that input and see how that lands within the plan. And it will also, again, refine this blueprint as we rebuild and strengthen our future grant applications. This is a really important aspect of this plan. Every grant application that exists really requires a strategy document behind the projects that we submit for grant funding. Years out, we really need to update this plan to make it pertinent to the grants that we are continuing to apply for. So there are going to be many opportunities to be heard in this process, just as there were in the initial process. We're going to have a survey. We've done many surveys, but again, another very important survey that can be done by our residents, whether they're here in town or displaced, to gain their input. We will also have a community meeting that will actually have multiple community meetings that will be virtual, as well as at least a community open house, which will be in person. So we really want to cast a wide net to allow virtual attendance, in-person attendance, whatever works best, whether you're here, whether you're displaced somewhere else, to make sure you can have your voice heard. So the schedule for this update, it's a pretty quick process. So we're beginning this now. So we're going to be having the survey available through the Town of Paradise website here very shortly. That will be available from mid-February into mid-March. Then we'll be holding a community meeting, which will be virtual in late March. Those dates we'll bring to you as soon as possible. And an open house, which will be in person in late March. And that will serve to not only kind of reflect back what we have heard so far, but also to solicit more information from people. And then finally, we'll be drafting that plan, or UDA will, with staff. And then we'll be presenting this completed update back to you in April or May of 2022. So that is the update process in a nutshell. We're really excited to get started and think this is going to be a really useful document, in addition to a really useful document that exists currently. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I think,
Oh, absolutely. So of course, your involvement as council members will be twofold. You of course are citizens, so you'll be asked to give input through that process, but you also will be sitting down and meeting with UDA and staff to give input on this process very directly. So you'll have a very large degree of input.
So my question is this: when you get to that third or fourth stage, where after you've listened to the virtual people and hopefully the one time and hopefully more in-person people, and then you start looking at what has to be changed or updated and what's new, what should be added or whatever, other than our potential involvement at that process, the staff's involvement and Barry's involvement, will there be any opportunity for, like we do with Measure V, for there to be a small group of citizens to be involved in that development, that stage of the development?
So let me clarify what you're asking. Are you saying a committee that would help to actually write the report?
Absolutely, or at least participate in it. In other words, where it's, where there would be at least a couple of citizens possibly involved, just, that have been involved through the process. They could volunteer just to be a part of it, because I think it's essential to let the citizens be a part of, of what we're going to rebuild our town to be.
Wouldn't be able to utilize that citizen advisory group that we already have in place?
Yes, our Community Relations Committee absolutely will be another stakeholder in this process, absolutely. When it comes to actually drafting the report, I think that really is best left to UDA staff and town staff, but absolutely, Councilmember Culleton, I agree that the community input is vital for this, and that's why we have so many opportunities to gather that input and to reflect it back. So if you remember last time, we had many, many meetings where we kind of took all the information in, and then we reflected it back and said, this is what we heard, is this right? And that's something that UDA does very, very well, is present that back and then get further input to say, did we hear you correctly? Does it need to be honed more?
That's that's exactly the piece
Yeah.
I'm looking for. I think it's essential as we move forward that this not just be the town staff and our consulting team developing the blueprint for the future. I think the citizenry has to be involved. I understand they're involved at the listening stage, virtually and in person. But maybe once there's a draft document, or, like I say, Barry did a great job last time. That's the only thing I'm advocating for, is that the public gets to see, before it becomes the new non-planned plan.
Yes. Well, and I think we can talk about the process where there's a draft available, right?
And I think Barry did a great job, like you said, an excellent
Yes.
job at bringing what we got back to the community.
Yes, this report, the end, there's not going to be any more input. This is a living document. As the first one was, this will continue to be a living document. And we'll be presenting this document to you for
Hey, Colette, can I
Yes.
just chime in for a minute?
yes, please do.
Sure. So, Councilmember Culleton, I think, your point is really well taken, and what we did last time is after each board or each recovery project, and we had discussions about it, and we actually, I think, used, in fact, I know we did, green and red dots to indicate support, or if some of the recovery projects are just going to be updated because of things like the emergency notification system. You all know that's moving ahead. So we'll give an update, and even in last week's community meeting, there were new ones, ideas that are going to come up through meeting with you and community residents and the stakeholders, the broader community, and discuss, because we can't be taking away and adding to the plan without, a fully vetted discussion. So it's
Well, I agree with Councilman Boland. You did a fantastic job, Barry. I think I told you that personally. You're a fantastic facilitator. I think the process, when we did that back in 2018, 19, we had just been, a few of us allowed back in town. A lot of us, number of new people that have moved to our community, as well as those of us that have come back to our community and rebuilt and do live here. And that's my thing. I just want to make sure that
completely.
One thing I'm concerned about is, back when we did this before, it was quite easy to get people coming to the meetings. And I think it's, as we've seen, and it's not as, I don't know if we're not getting the word out that it's happening. I don't know. If we have to skywrite, it's just communicating. And I don't know that just Facebook and that type of stuff is the way to do that. So if we can have signs on the road, I know we have, PR gives us the ability to get that word out that's different than what we were doing in the last few years or so. I just think it's important. People want to know.
Yes, I totally agree. I think that's an excellent point. You're
It
right,
is.
and we definitely want people to attend virtually, but also in person. It's really important. So thank you.
maybe possibly, I agree 100%. Budget and buy television, radio advertising, of course negotiate, see if we can get a great deal. But because it's an important thing, and there's other communities that are learning from us.
On that, Councilmember Culleton, that's exactly right, because we get the same calls that you do, and folks say, please explain to us. It's hard to really appreciate, because you're so close to it, the value of what you've accomplished in 36 months, what the town has accomplished, and I think quantifying that for fatigue, Vice Mayor Boland, as you've noted.
Yes.
And your community has still necessarily has probably more meetings on fire-related things, to pay in different ways, like getting a survey out there. We've had a lot of success with that because you can leave it up for a month and people can do it when it's convenient. Or virtual meetings, we've had better turnouts in the last couple of years virtual. I think your point about doing everything we can to advertise it is right on the mark.
And I think we're going to see a shift in what we learn from people, because there's more people moving in that we're trying to get there, but they see a new town, and it's going to be exciting to see what comes up through that.
Absolutely. We're seeing all of you.
Good seeing you, Barry.
Thanks, Barry.
In person. Right.
Yeah, call me.
Staff has my cell phone. I think the mayor and the vice mayor and there's others that do too, so it hasn't changed.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so item 1J is the Campfire recovery updates, which are all projects, advocacy, economic recovery. Any questions, comments?
Yeah, I have a question for Colette on that.
Yes.
Is that on?
Yes.
Okay, I have a question on the refund on the FEMA trees.
Okay.
Where are we with that? What are we looking at?
Great question. We are still discuss that very thing this week, so we should have more information very soon.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit about why we're still, I mean, because it's been over a year almost
Yes.
for some of these. And
So it is, yeah, it's a high amount. And so the reason it is taking so long, so we talked a little bit about this at a previous meeting, that we recently discovered that the way on that, we are trying to rectify that. We're actually going about it kind of in two parallel tracks. And we're pretty confident that one of those two will net us the result that we're looking for, which is the full reimbursement to this program.
okay, do you have any estimate? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but do you what do you think we're looking at for reimbursement?
To go the regular process for this program, and as soon as we have more information, we will let you know, especially if it differs from that very much.
Okay, thank you.
Expended are allowable expenses under the FEMA PA. They call it the Papa G. It's like the Bible. So the money that was spent was done under the regulation of that. It's just the administration of it.
I had a couple of questions. I think this is all the stuff that you covered.
Okay.
So one was on the tree thing, on the claims part, right?
Okay.
4 are still out there. What's up with that?
I'm going to have Brian Selecki answer that since he works with
Okay, well, before he answers that, then let me ask you this other question, because he doesn't know about this.
Okay.
On the design standards through the Design Review Committee, and so whatever our current design standards are, there were 15 people on that committee. It was pretty functional.
Sounds like it. That was
Again, I'm advocating for, be it business owners, the chamber, citizens to be involved in the development of this new or updated or revised.
agree with you. I absolutely believe in citizen input in anything that we do, especially something like this.
Okay.
So as you recall, we did have a public meeting about that last summer to talk about the design standards. As that over, they will be available for the public to look at kind of what has come out of that effort. And we can talk about further refinement at that point.
Okay.
So, but those are coming.
I mean, gosh, I can't have that sign here, or whatever.
Right.
Or I got to have a beige building, because I'm in
Right.
this district.
Right. Well, and it's important to note that, as you said, we do already have design standards
Right,
that are
right.
in place. And so really, that was kind of really one of the major goals, was to make them more accessible, more user-friendly, make it
Right.
easier for people to find them, use them, and implement them.
Okay, that's good, because I know that our entire code book is due for a revision. And this is our opportunity to take those things that are onerous and make them more user-friendly.
Question again?
Well, the question is, it says that a lot of people during the tree cleanup, the hazardous tree removal thing they were doing, a lot of people's property that were not even involved in the program, and some that were, didn't even know how to respond to that, finally they were told, oh yeah, here's a form you can fill out and you can file this claim.
Correct.
So what I'm reading here is that 4 people have been satisfied and 52 people are still waiting.
No, you're reading it backwards,
Oh.
standing.
Oh, okay.
That had not been finalized.
Okay.
And so, and those 4 were in process. Those 4 tended to be higher dollar value ones, and there was
Yeah.
attorneys with subcontractors and stuff involved.
I
So-
just read it backwards. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Absolutely.
So the next update in there was Mark Maddox on infrastructure and sewer update. Any questions for Mark?
Good job.
Last regional committee meeting, we asked that all of you get an update at our March meeting. So at the next costing information for what it will cost us to connect to Chico.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. So no other questions for Mark? Okay. So item 2, consent calendar.
Move acceptance?
Wait, can we pull one item from it?
No.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
Wait, who made the first one?
Bolin.
Polling 2C.
Motion by Bolin, seconded by Jones to accept the consent calendar minus item 2C. Roll call vote, Vice Mayor Bolin.
Aye.
Councilmember.
Okay, back to item 2C. Rose.
I just wanted a little bit more of an explanation of what this is for people who are listening and people who are in the audience. Just as a little bit more.
No problem. So this is a state of California home grant. It's federal dollars that are administered through the state. And we traditionally have and first-time home buyer. As we realize now, a lot of homes will be new, so we will have very limited need for rehabilitation the most moving forward. And of course, our first-time home buyer program should be even stronger. Caldwell Banker had it, the town of Paradise. The median sales price in 2020, houses are not affordable any longer in Paradise. I did some research today and looked online. There are of 21 houses available on the market today, only 5 of those are under $400,000. One of those was under 3. Us help working families, workforce housing, working families to purchase those houses because we can offset what they can afford to pay and then what the gap is. In theory, doesn't sound like it should fit in Paradise. It's called infill new construction, and it is actually meant for inner cities to find those vacant lots and to build on them. In what we've discovered is we can get money, the money that we're getting in the program can turn around to be first-time home buyer assistance, and the money that we get from the sale would go back into our revolving loan to help Paradise regenerate the rooftops and the tax base. So, and just looking forward toward the future.
And that's not a lot different from what we're already doing.
Build their homes. Both our program and the state of California, Recover California, are mostly for people looking to rebuild on their own lots. This program will allow us to
Since building spec homes for affordable spec homes for people to live in.
It would be modest housing, so it wouldn't be as much as 400,000. We're trying to get the limit to be up. Right now, that it does afford us the opportunity to build houses. I guess not so much spec build because we can advertise the program and get the folks in before we even build a house. So we're building for affordable families. One amazing woman, single parent, 2 jobs, juggling. She's a DCM worker.
disaster case manager. So these are our people who are working hard for our community, but can't afford for.
I move to approve.
I'll second.
Motion by Tryon, seconded by Jones to approve item 2C. Vice Mayor Boland?
Aye.
Councilmember Culleton?
Aye.
Councilmember Jones?
Aye.
Councilmember Tryon?
Aye.
And Mayor Crowder.
Aye.
I have one card on this item from John Romelia.
You know, I've been doing real good, trying not to get up here over the several meetings, but there were 3 things that have taken place that I felt I needed to open my big mouth. Previously, during the Lauren Gill reign, it was disallowed. However, it was titled under land clearing previously. And it was an $89 permit. And those type of companies could overnight burn. It's still on the books, but it seems to have went away somewhere in the 2003. No longer salvageable as saw logs, they're all punky, and we need to get rid of them. $42 a ton at the landfill, or $35 a ton at Old Durham Wood Products does not work. We need a way here. And then the town, if they go into abatement, it's just gonna cost the town all the more and wait for it to be collected. I propose that we would bring back the land and proper inspections, burn into the evenings. We had one pile last week that, we basically had to put it out twice. Instead of costing them $1,000 to get rid of it, it cost over $2,000. Consider this. Campfire has told me it's up to council. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Public hearing, we have no information provided by staff concerning the FY 2021-22 by Ross Gill.
All right, good evening, council. So I will be presenting tonight an overview of the financial activity and proposed budget adjustments for the general fund and other major funds townwide. Quite a bit of information to get through, but I'll try to make it as painless as possible. So to start, a complete analysis has been done on the townwide financial activity for the first 7 months of the fiscal year, so out to the end of January, basically comparing the operating and capital budgets with the actual financial activity for the originally adopted budgets from July 13th, and then the amendments that were done in November 9th. So overall, I would say revenues and expenditures townwide are largely within budgeted expectations, with a few proposed adjustments based on that first half of the fiscal year. So we'll go ahead and start out here by taking a look at a hiring update. So as you may recall, we had 16 total additional positions that were approved through this last budget cycle, which is more than we typically would see in a given year. We've been very successful so far and onboarded a total of 14 of those positions, with just 2 remaining to date. Those 2 positions are the IT director, which is actually currently in the onboarding process, and we are expecting them to start next week. And the second position is the senior planner, for which we had originally planned recruitment to begin early February, so we'll start that process here shortly. But just wanted to provide an update that overall we're on track and have actually brought most of those positions on board already. All right, so now we can move on to take a look at the general fund. So just starting out here with the general fund overview, just as a reminder, with the amended budget, we had budgeted a total of $4.92 million in general fund revenues, and this consists primarily of those property and sales tax revenue numbers. Additionally, we had budgeted transfers from other funds into the general fund totaling $10,249,000. The biggest component of this is the transfer from the PG&E settlement fund to compensate for lost revenues, with other minor transfers as well from other funds for central service allocations, as well as departmental shares of pension obligation bond payments. So these two things bring the total budgeted revenues and transfers into the general fund of just over $15 million. Expenditures, we had planned basically a budgeted equalization of the general fund revenues with those expenditures. So you can see here we had budgeted a total of $15,163,000 in general fund expenditures, which is just under the amount of revenues. As you can see, there was a $2,900 increase that we'd actually budgeted into the general fund for this year. The next column over there, the second onto the right, is our actuals to date. So you can see our revenues of $2,627,000 so far are trending really right there within those budgeted expectations for the first half of the year. And we'll look at those here on the next slide in a little more detail. We also had transfers in from other funds totaling $4,338,000 for the first half of the fiscal year, and this was consisting entirely of that transfer from the PG&E settlement fund used to balance the offset in lost revenues. So this brings a total of transfers in and revenues so far for the year at $6,966,000, which matches our total fund expenditures to date for a totally balanced budget there in the general fund. And again, we'll look at those expenditures here in a couple slides in a lot more detail. For the amendments that we're proposing here for the mid-year budget review, we have a total of $185,444 of additional expenditures based on activity that we've seen for the first half of the fiscal year, with a additional transfer in from the PG&E settlement fund to compensate for those additional expenses. So one important thing to note there is the total proposed transfer from the PG&E settlement fund is still in line with the maximum annual transfer that was calculated using that medium growth projection in the town's long-term fiscal sustainability model. So we're now projecting a total transfer of $9,636,000 with those additional transfers of $185,000, which is falling below that calculated amount of $9,721,000. So basically this boils down to still trending within what we would expect from that long-term fiscal sustainability model.
Ross, how much below that maximum is it?
So we're about 500,000 under with these amendments baked in.
Thank you.
All right, so now that we've kind of seen an overview, we can take a look in a little more detail of the revenues to date. So if you recall at the last update, we still hadn't really received the first allocations of revenues, but we do have some updates now for actual revenues to date. So I'll just kind of highlight here some of the top revenues that we've seen, starting with property tax. So typically, property taxes are received by the town in two major allocations. The first allocation was actually received in December and is trending right there with what we had expected and baked into the budget. So you can see we've received 1.4 million of the 2.1 that we had originally estimated, and we would expect the remainder of those funds to come in here in the later portion of the year. The next major source of revenue for the town is general sales and use tax. You can see these actual amounts are actually trending quite a bit behind what we had originally budgeted. And that's not unusual, as we've seen with COVID and other processing delays recently. The receipt of the funds actually is trending a little bit behind what we would normally expect. However, we have received reports of the revenue that the town will receive for the first 6 months of the fiscal year, and those are at or above the halfway point of what we would expect. So really, again, trending within those expectations there. The third major component of revenues that I'll point out here, again, is that PG&E settlement amount, totaling $404,338,000 so far. Again, below that halfway mark for the year, so we're in really good shape on that front. The last piece of information that I'll just highlight here is the transient occupancy taxes. So these are taxes associated with temporary lodging at hotels, motels, and inns within Paradise town limits. Currently, we only have 2 hotels that are reporting transient occupancy taxes, which is down a little bit from what we've seen pre-fire. To date, we've received $72,000 in revenues from this source for the first 6 months of the fiscal year, which is just over half the annual budget amount of $135,000. So just wanted to point this one out, as while it's not as significant, say, as property and sales tax revenue, these funds are still critical in ensuring that the town balances that general fund, especially in this first year of budgeting without the backfill from the state. So before moving on to expenditures, just wanted to kind of pause here and see if there was any questions or comments on revenues.
You're feeling good about franchise taxes?
Yes, yeah, I think that's again another one of those that kind of lags a little bit behind.
So who gets to hold on to our money until we get it?
I think it's processed with the state, so we actually don't see the receipt of those funds until that's passed through.
Surprise.
Is the Measure V the same reason as the general sales tax?
Exactly, yeah. And again, we have seen those reports for the first 6 months, and we're actually exceeding our expectations, especially in Measure V.
So I have a question on page 73, which is the PG&E Settlement Fund update. So it looks like our total, and I hope I'm reading these numbers correctly, our total settlement for the town was $270 million, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. And then we paid out to an outside attorney 48 million in attorney fees?
That is correct, yes.
And then we paid out another 147,000 to our in-house attorney, but they were working for us at the time and receiving a paycheck for us. And that's a question because I think this was all done prior to me being on the council, so I'm just making sure that I understand correctly.
Yep, and likewise, this was all kind of settled before me coming on board as well, but
Yeah.
that is my understanding. Yeah. And just reviewing the documentation, yeah, that is correct, that our in-house litigation counsel did receive the $147,000 there.
And I'm just, is that normal for an in-house person to receive?
Nothing's normal anymore with some of this stuff.
Okay, I'm just, and I just don't know. I mean, is that a standard?
Yeah, so it is a standard for out-of-scope work. So this was considered out-of-scope. So with out-of-scope work, there is an agreement between the in-house attorney and the client, which would be the town, to come to some type of an agreement to do outside scope work. So that they are doing work for that is additional funds that would be handled.
So, but we also hired an outside attorney that we paid $48 million.
To do that, but that is normally how things would handle. The 48 million, that's whatever these are. Okay, go ahead, please.
So that we were one part of that. So to be a part of that group, which is the whole reason we got our settlement, I mean, PID chose not to be a part of that group, and they still don't have theirs. We were subject to the
And again, I'm just asking because I'm trying to understand. So that would be no different than all of our residents who put in for the Campfire thing. Okay, so then, but we had an in-house attorney that we were paying monthly submitted invoices for that, or how did that part work?
I think it was
Or was that a
percent.
percentage
I think
of
it was
his
a
contract?
percentage.
It was
is
a
what I remember.
percent, and he was sort of supervising that out being represented, but it was outside the scope of his contract.
Okay.
What you're bringing up, nobody cared for, but same as we're paying 30%, I think, on our attorney's fees, so.
Okay. Yeah, I just, when I looked at, just held your nose, pay the bill. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go to the last page.
All right, actually rewind. All right, so any other questions on revenues before moving on to expenditures? All right, hearing none. So overall, general fund expenditures to date, again, by department are largely within what we would expect to see for the first 6-7 months of the fiscal year, with the exception of some relatively minor exceptions to budgeted expenditures, just based on activity that's happened since the original budget development. So as previously mentioned, total additional expenditures are offset again by an additional transfer primarily from that PG&E settlement fund. So the full list and description of all proposed general fund budget amendments have been included in the agenda packet for your review, but I did want to highlight just the most significant changes that we're proposing here. Starting with non-departmental budget amendments totaling $100,000. Based on discussions with council for that first 6 months of the year and kind of what we've seen for actual activity and abatement costs for both RV and tree abatement, we have added this as a budgeted line item. We've seen about $33,000 in abatement costs come through for the first part of the fiscal year. So we really don't expect to exceed this 100,000, but just wanted to have that there as kind of a safety net for those costs. The second biggest amendment was actually legal costs relating to an unbudgeted settlement that occurred during the first half of the fiscal year that was agreed upon in November 9th during that regularly scheduled meeting. Three other departments that just wanted to point out here was police department costs totaling $9,000. This primarily covers adjustments really relating to actual costs over the original estimate that was included in the budget for workstation furniture and equipment replacement and unanticipated repairs to the police station building itself that were both identified as urgent needs for the current year.
That was 18,000, you mean?
Yeah, so 9,000, that actually includes another 9,000 of fleet costs that totals that 18,000. Fleet's just kind of wrapped up into that police line item there.
So Measure V doesn't pay for building repairs and stuff like that?
They do some. It wasn't included in this budget, just kind of took it out of the general fund bucket here, as it wasn't included in the Measure V budget originally for this year.
Okay. I thought we were using it for that
It could
type
be.
stuff.
That was part of the intent.
Yeah.
It definitely could be. And we will look at some proposed amendments to Measure V that have gone through the Oversight Committee. So we could add those certainly, take it out of the general fund bucket and add it
At
into.
the end of the
Measure
year,
V.
look at it and make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, if that's, the direction of the council, we could make that amendment here for mid-year instead.
That's what we had it for, I thought, so, yeah.
So with that, those fleet costs that add into that 9,000 for the police department, those primarily cover the request for a new scanner tool to ensure that our fleet staff has updated equipment to work on some of these newer vehicles that the town is purchasing. Our old equipment's kind of out of date and doesn't allow for those updated maintenance projects that we're seeing. And then additional costs relating to the second fleet mechanic position that we budgeted to bring on board last fiscal year, but actually was hired this fiscal year. With that second mechanic position in place, we're actually seeing a higher capacity to complete some of those projects that were put off with only one mechanic previously. And the last budget adjustment that I'll just highlight here is for the Community Development Department, totaling $9.3 thousand in additional cost. This covers additional anticipated costs for ongoing general plan update. And this is actually entirely offset by transfers in from the general plan fee fund. These funds are collected over the year and actually reserved specifically for this purpose. So just wanted to highlight there that those actually are offset by an additional transfer in. So all these total adjustments boil down to a total increase of $184,000 for the general fund, which again is offset by additional transfers in from the PG&E settlement fund, as well as that general plan fee fund. Any other questions on items maybe not specifically covered or items that we just discussed? Hearing none. All right. So the last thing we'll take a look at here on the general fund is the reserve balances that we're budgeted for. So this is just another look at the net effect of the general fund adjustments that we just went over. So as you can see here, the general fund itself, those first three rows there, are actually unaffected by the total adjustments due to the fact that we're offsetting these additional costs by an additional transfer in from the PG&E settlement fund. So that second to last line there, you'll see that additional transfer of $169,000, which reduces our total proposed budgeted reserves at the end of the fiscal year for the PG&E settlement fund to $210,590,000. And with that, we'll go ahead and move on to Measure V. So as I mentioned previously, the town did hold a Measure V Citizens Oversight Committee meeting in January, just last month. And the committee reviewed the activity within Measure V for the first 2 quarters of the fiscal year, as well as 2 kind of net adjustments that have been proposed coming out of the committee that I just wanted to update council on and seek approval for. So we'll start here by taking a look at those adjustments. The first adjustment is a $179,500 proposed increase for the purchase of 3 police vehicles and related equipment, as well as conversion of 1 patrol vehicle that's currently in use to a marked K-9 patrol vehicle. And that's to help get the police department caught up on their vehicle replacement program. We're seeing extremely long lead times on our purchases, especially of vehicles. And so by placing these items on the budget this fiscal year, it'll allow us to kind of get a jump start on those purchases so that we don't have those long lead times in the next fiscal year. The second adjustment is really kind of 3 adjustments wrapped into one. And the first really is a decrease in one of the line items that we had previously budgeted for, and that's the purchase of a bucket truck for the Public Works Department. When we started looking into this purchase, it turned out that the lead time on this, we wouldn't expect to receive this until mid to maybe early 2023. And so with that in mind, it's been proposed to actually reallocate that original budget to purchase some other pieces of equipment that can be fulfilled before that 2023 time, and then push this purchase out into next fiscal year. So the reallocation of that $140,000 is proposed to be put towards the purchase of a backhoe and loader that were destroyed during the Campfire, net of insurance proceeds totaling $113,000. As well as the final cost of animal control truck and police department evidence refrigerator replacement. These costs were actually coming in a little bit over what we had originally budgeted. These 2 items were included in the Measure V budget from the previous fiscal year. And so we're just proposing to kind of reallocate some of those cost savings from this year towards this project to maximize the grant funding that's kind of the matching piece of this. So overall, with these 2 adjustments, there's a net impact of an increase of $173,000 in total budgeted expenditures for Measure V, which would reduce that fund balance by that amount. Any questions on any of those items?
We still need the bucket truck though, right? And it'll be purchased next fiscal year.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
But we're getting ahead on ourselves with the police cars, but we're not with that. I mean, shouldn't we be getting in the queue so that we have that next year?
Yeah, so we will still, we actually have an open purchase order for this item currently, so that will save our spot already for this item. It's just really moving those costs.
We
to the
don't
next-
expend the monies until,
Exactly, yep.
Okay.
Yep. So just matching really the timing of that expense
Okay.
with the fiscal year that'll be
but
incurred.
with the police cars, we have to expend the money this fiscal year to get in that queue for those.
Yep, seeking approval to place that order currently so that we have the authorization to make sure that
spend that
that's in
money.
place. Yep, exactly.
Are we still buying the police cars on extended payment things, lease options?
No, these are actually purchased outright, so, yeah, yep.
Good, that's a good thing.
All right. So just one last look at Measure V, and that's just highlighting the Measure V fund overview. So as we just reviewed, additional expenditures are proposed to be added to the current year budget totaling $173,000. This brings the total proposed budgeted expenditures to $1,425,000, which increases the original budget decrease of that fund balance from $219,000 to $393,000. But as you can see here, we've still built up a ton of reserves there over the years, so we're budgeting to still have a $869,000 balance there that can be used for future fiscal years. All right, and those are kind of the major highlights. I'll just run through kind of quickly here some of the other funds townwide, just to highlight the amendments that we're proposing there. Starting with the Building Safety and Wastewater Services Fund. So overall, the revenues and expenditures for this department are overwhelmingly within budgeted expectations. There was just one minor revision that's really just a reallocation of costs here that was identified. As $3,000 were needed for uniform purchases for some of those new employees that we've hired this year. And those costs are actually going to be reallocated from savings identified on temporary staffing. So reducing that temporary staffing budget and then adding that to invest in our newly hired employees. So a $0 impact in this fund. Next, we have the Campfire Recovery Fund. A few adjustments here, starting with the purchase of mobile police radios of $6,643. So during our previous fiscal year, the town was approved for a grant through USDA for the purchase of 9 mobile radios for the police department. When those radio purchases actually came through this current fiscal year, the actual cost of those radios was less than we had originally expected. So in order to really fully leverage the grant funding that was available, it was decided to purchase 1 additional radio, which allowed us to apply for and receive another $2,000 in grant funding. However, we were required to have a matching portion there of $6,000 that was used from the insurance proceeds that we've already received. So just reducing the amount of those proceeds in that fund balance currently. The second adjustment here is $3,550 in leave accrual payments that were required for the previous disaster recovery manager and grants manager positions, both of which these positions experienced turnover after initial budget development, but were required to be paid out. So just including that here in this department. The last adjustment, again, is a 0 net dollar impact to this fund, and that's the long-term recovery plan update that we just spoke of earlier. So this included a $110,000 not-to-exceed contract to update the town's long-term recovery plan. However, we were able to identify savings from the transfer that's required from the general fund this year for payment of the bonds associated with the town as successor to the redevelopment agency. Those savings were actually identified as a result of additional revenues coming in this year than we had originally anticipated. However, those revenues are fully exhausted as of this current fiscal year. So we were able to save a little bit there from our original budget and really apply that towards investment in the town's future through this long-term recovery plan update. Next, one minor adjustment to the COVID-19 fund. So as you may recall, we had originally not budgeted any revenue or expenditure activity in this fund, as at the time of initial development, those figures were largely unknown. However, during the last budget update meeting, we did add $1.4 million in budgeted revenues to this fund. If you recall, that's coming from that first allocation that the town received of the American Rescue Plan Act. And then we also had additional revenues that we received based on tax credits that were available for federally mandated leave for employees. So during the first few months since that last budget update, we have seen additional costs that have been required for COVID-19 prevention and mitigation, as this kind of continues to be an ongoing issue. Those costs totaled $9,375 for this current quarter, and so they're just included here as a budget amendment to support those costs of ongoing mitigation efforts. The remainder of those American Rescue Plan funds are currently budgeted to be reserved for future use towards those eligible infrastructure projects, as we were directed during the September 14th council meeting.
So what do we spend $9,300 on for prevention and mitigation?
Cleaning, rental costs for trucks is a big one to keep employees separated, to promote social distancing. I think those are the kind of big hits. Hopefully with these,
Okay, thank you.
vehicle purchases, that'll cut down on that a little bit, but those were the biggest components. All right, a few last items to go through here, starting with gas tax. So it was identified by staff as a need to propose a $15,000 amendment to the gas tax fund. This is for interim road rehabilitation on a portion of Skyway that's experiencing significant deterioration. So this would improve the safety of that road until utilities are undergrounded and we can actually get in there and complete permanent repairs. This is funded really just from the reserves that are currently in place in this fund. And then lastly, we have $1,700 for the need that was identified by Public Works staff for a water tank on the recently purchased skid steer to cut down on kind of dust and I guess just dust really on the maintenance and construction projects. So a total net impact here of $16,000. All right, asset replacement fund. One minor adjustment here, just $2,000 for the replacement of townwide ID printers. This was last purchased like 5 or 6 years ago, and it's currently exceeding its useful life and kind of beginning to experience some issues there. The cost of this additional piece of equipment is actually budgeted to be offset by an increase in revenues as we surplus some police department equipment that then gets placed into this fund. So really a net increase in fund balance based on these two adjustments. All right. Really, on this slide, I just wanted to kind of highlight the work that we've done through the capital improvement and disaster recovery funds, just as we make progress on these projects that we've budgeted. So we haven't actually received a ton of reimbursement on these costs so far, totaling $2.45 million in the capital improvement project fund and $805,000 in the disaster recovery project funds. These projects are usually funded on a reimbursement basis. So we're currently working through that process to develop those reimbursement packages for these projects on the first 6 months of financial activity. And we're hoping to have some reimbursements here by the time of the next update and surely by the end of the fiscal year. All right, and second to last, we'll just take a quick look at the PG&E settlement fund. We kind of went over kind of where we're at currently with that fund already, but just wanted to reiterate one more time kind of where we're at with that transfer. So as we mentioned earlier, we're seeking to increase that budgeted transfer by about $169,000 with these budgeted expenditures. But again, that's largely within that amount that was calculated to be transferred this year through our fiscal sustainability model. I also did have one correction to the agenda summary that I just wanted to highlight here, and that is in the earnings to date. In the agenda summary, this was actually included a early draft of this figure, it was just a mistype. It was included as $4,712,000, and it should be $1,712,000 lifetime earnings on those funds, as well as a fair market value adjustment of just about $1 million. So just as a reminder, this figure is really only included here for reporting purposes when we're looking at the balance of these funds. That loss will not actually be realized as long as those securities are held to maturity. So working with the town's investment advisors, we do fully intend to hold all securities invested in until maturity. So in reality, that fair market value will not actually be realized by the town. And that brings our total budgeted settlement amount to $215,393,000 as it currently sits. All right, one last item to cover here, and that is expenditures that were budgeted in the prior fiscal year that are actually now occurring in this current fiscal year. So you kind of have the list in front of you here that was included in the agenda packet. But these costs were already approved by council during the previous fiscal year. And during budget development, were actually estimated actuals within that budget document. At the time, those costs were kind of expected to have been incurred during the previous fiscal year. But as we review some of those projects, we're noticing that those costs are kind of trailing into the current fiscal year. So the adjustments for these items are, again, just already approved items by council that we're seeking to match the budgeted line item with the expenditure that it's actually occurring in. So with that, we have a couple items included for requested action. The first is to receive and file the financial information provided by staff for the mid-year budget update, as well as approve the staff recommended budget adjustments with that one correction that I just highlighted on the agenda summary for the PG&E settlement funds. And with that, I'll open it up to any other questions.
And this includes the 3 police cars? If we pass this, that includes purchase of the 3 police cars?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
I just have a comment. I don't have any concerns with anything that's in your proposal at all. I just want to make a comment about the historical fiscal culture in Paradise, since you're new to the town and
Gotcha.
we've always been poor. I think that there's the potential to see the PG&E settlement money, and we can piss that money away. So I just want to re-emphasize that investment so that we can keep this town alive until we bring our tax base back. And I don't want to see us get complacent and say, oh, we can just take it out of the PG&E money.
Totally. And
Just a reminder.
I appreciate that comment too, and I think that's really where to ensure that we're really staying within what we originally anticipated, and making sure that we're sustainable within that time frame that we've originally projected as well. So yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I appreciate your agreement on that, because we only got one shot at this. Thank you for what you put on there.
Thank you.
I move acceptance, and is there any cards? I'm sorry.
Can I make one comment? I just want to highlight one thing. On the savings for the long-term $1,000 into that project, the first being North Valley Community Foundation, and the second is Adventist Health Foundation. So both of them are partners within that to help reduce the cost associated with that.
Very nice.
Motion by Boland, seconded by Culleton. Roll call vote, Vice Mayor Boland.
Aye.
Councilmember Culleton.
Aye.
Councilmember Jones.
Aye.
Councilmember Tryon.
Aye.
And Mayor Crowder.
Aye.
Thank you. Oh. I have it someplace. It is.
Why don't we take a break while she's like.
Affirming the town of Paradise's notice of intent to comply for the requirements of mandatory solid waste. Susan?
Hi.
Hi there.
Good evening, Mayor Crowder. Thank you. Good evening, council. So, organic waste recycling laws to date. So just a broad overview of SB 1383. It does require the state to reduce organic waste disposal, which includes food, green waste, as well as paper waste in the state by 75% by 2025. Partnered with that would be increasing our edible food recovery by 20% by 2025. What's different about Senate Bill 1383, it's actually a statewide target, not just a jurisdictional. And then CalRecycle is in charge of adopting the regulations that are necessary to achieve those statewide standards. So an overview of organic waste in California. It's actually our biggest segment of what we landfill. Everything that is thrown away, there's only 33% of it, according to CalRecycle, that's non-organic. According to their stats, in 2017, California disposed of 27 million tons of organic waste. What SB 1383 is aiming to do is reduce that down to about 6.5 million a year. So why focus on reducing the landfilling of organic waste? First, the anaerobic, I always want to call it digestion because I always speak septic talk, but it's the anaerobic breakdown creates methane. Methane is 72 times more potent than carbon dioxide. It creates air quality pollutants, nitrogen oxides, which are what you see smog created from, as well as particulate matter, the stuff that we're always trying to gauge during the wildfire smoke events to know if we need to have our inspectors wear masks out in the field. Methane contributes to climate change, and as we know, climate change costs the state billions in wildfire, flood, and drought. So starting in 2022 is when the jurisdictional responsibilities of the Senate bill kicked in. And that would be that all jurisdictions needed to provide organics collection to all residents and businesses. So this is a means for them to have somewhere to put food scraps. Also, establish edible food recovery programs, conduct education and outreach. There's also a procurement section of this Senate bill where we would need to purchase recycled and recovered organic materials, things like compost and mulch, biofuel, electricity, for either our use or to donate to be used by others. Also, capacity planning for new organic processing facilities, figuring out in our waste stream for Paradise, what percentage of what we throw away is organic so we can understand what our total output is and know what kind of capacity we need to be looking for, engaging for. So jurisdictional inspection and enforcement requirements are part of the Senate bill as well.
This year, all jurisdictions, CalRecycle will be looking for updated ordinances that include enforcement measures. The state has a model ordinance to help build off of. There's new definitions, new terminology, more references to these Senate bills and Assembly bills. And that's supposed to be taking place this year. We're tentatively slated to come back to council in March with our amendments. And then between now and 2024, start doing annual compliance reviews for all disposers, residential and commercial, route reviews, inspections, and then starting in 2024, the jurisdiction becomes responsible for enforcement through notice of violations to the individual residents or commercial violators, as well as issuing penalties for those violations. So where does CalRecycle fit into this? Beginning this year, their oversight really starts, and part of that is authorizing jurisdictional waivers. There's three main kinds. One's rural, and that would be for counties that are less than 70,000 people. One's for high elevations, if you're above 4,500 feet. And then the other's for low population, which are jurisdictions under 7,500 people. They're also going to be overseeing and monitoring the jurisdictions for compliance with the Senate bill, and then issuing jurisdictional violations and corrective action plans for those who aren't complying with the Senate bill. So of those waivers, the low population waiver became available at the end of 2021, and the town did file for it, which required a population of less than 7,500, which we had, but also less than 5,000 tons municipal solid waste in 2014. So we still filed, even though we disposed of about 15,000 tons then, because we had a full population. So we asked for special consideration. Please use the 2019 post-fire tonnage as our base rate. It was 2-point change, so we would have qualified. It was immediately denied. So the response from CalRecycle was that they had no discretion in the decision. They met with staff afterwards and said, your next step is to file for a notice of intent to comply, and that's what we're here for tonight. That was authorized by Senate Bill 619, knowing that even based on CalRecycle's own admission, the statewide would still need somewhere between 50 and 100 new facilities to accommodate this organic waste recycling. So this notice of intent to comply allows extensions for compliance, not a waiver, but an extension. So tonight we'll be talking about the resolution for the town to file for our notice of intent to comply, but at the same time, we still want to be working with lobbyists to still move forward with a special waiver consideration. We don't want to take this no as our final answer. So in January, to kind of help jurisdictions do all this work that's going to be necessary to comply, CalRecycle issued one-time grant applications. They're non-competitive, so we're eligible for $20,000, and it's to help us get whatever consultants and guidance we need to start doing all the facets that SB 1383 is going to require. Help us with our capacity planning, help us with the enforcement, the record keeping. How do we build these edible food recovery programs? Stuff like that. So the other resolution in the packet is about giving the authority to submit for the application as required by CalRecycle. So tonight, the council requested action is to authorize a resolution affirming the town's notice of intent to comply with SB 1383. It lists all the obvious reasons why we're not in a position to comply with it at this time. And then authorize a resolution allowing submittal to CalRecycle for the SB 1383 local assistance grants. And then with that, if there's any questions, I can answer.
What is edible food recovery program?
So,
what in the world?
That's a great question. They break it down into Tier 1 and Tier 2. Tier 1 are the larger producers, like food manufacturers that mainly provide prepackaged food,
Yeah,
or wholesale, like fruits and vegetables. So we don't have any in Paradise that meet that level.
No.
And they have to start, what you would do is hook up almost with like the churches that we had, connect them up with the business, you know, what days can they come by, get what's extra, that kind of thing, or working, there's actually some app that
I can't think of what it's called at the moment, almost like as a business, if you had extra food. There's- Yeah, but Uber style. Grocery stores are supposed to now, So it starts with the big manufacturers, and then starting in 2024, that's where it starts trickling down to more like prepared food, packaged and then brought somewhere. and the town is supposed to monitor and, Yes, we are supposed to help facilitate those connections, and so we've been. Susan, I appreciate your smile. I can understand that we definitely have other things that we're working on at the moment, and it's ambitious, and it can help, there are many fine points of this, but we just need time to get there. So and is that's what we're Northern asking for. Recycling going to collect? What works best for the town? Is it doing a fourth cart where it's just food, because that's the only kind of facility that we can find to take it that will only take food? Do we combine it with the green waste? But then we have to find a facility that will have two bins that have to be picked up weekly now, because you can't do every other if No, you've mixed food waste you're with right. green waste. So now we need a slightly larger fleet to do 2 weekly pickup.
You're absolutely right that we should not take that no for an answer. We should not be expected to do something that, of our efforts into getting legislation to get us out of this.
Agreed. If they would have just accepted the new base rate based on the population now, we would have had the waiver, right?
Well,
It makes no
the whole thing
sense.
I've been saying, and with Jody's comment, I said this to Kevin. I get that the only tool we have right now to avoid any fines or anything is to file this notice to this resolution. Okay, we can't do it unless they're going to fund it. They're going to pay for somebody to implement all of this. They're going to
Right.
pay for the educational thing. We're not going to do it. And so I mean, we need to take the hard line, sue them, blow them up, whatever. Get Gallagher, get Nielsen, get all the people, I mean, it's ludicrous. The fact that they denied, when we meet all the qualifications, that's insane. I mean, I think, let's be the poster child. I mean, I don't want to invite litigation, but, I mean, at some point,
Yeah.
we're the little town that burned down. We are the unicorn. And so let's go.
Right.
Sometimes you got to just say, no, enough's enough.
There,
Facilities,
because you
yeah.
have food banks and you have schools and you have things like that, that you can repackage. But I think the term insane for our situation is applicable at this point. Because the only other option for our residents would be to put it in their green waste, but they compost a lot of this and reuse it, which I think is what they're getting to. Again, not in a community like ours right now.
Trying to rebuild.
with Where we are, yeah.
And that's the other thing is no place in Butte County to take it. The rendering plant will take pure food scraps only. You put one French fry wrapper in there, and they'll reject it. You put anything else in there, they'll reject it. The only compost facility, Old Durham Wood facility
Correct.
in Butte County to take any of this. It's
YOLO
just nuts.
would be our closest option, which clearly would not be financially Yeah. feasible.
So,
Spent to comply, so we get that filed by March 1st to avoid any kind of financial penalties. And then also the resolution allowing us to make the submittal for the $20,000.
But why do we want their money? We want to blow them up. I mean, I get it.
Oh, no, you're right, but even if we,
But hopefully, by the time we exceed the population limit, it would be my hope that this thing does get litigated, this
Right.
thing does get challenged.
oh, I wouldn't doubt it.
But it's tonnage also.
Well, you're right, and you're right, there's and, both and, right. Is there any cards, I'll move, we have an intent to someday in our distant future.
To adopt resolution number 2022-10 and 11. Roll call vote, Vice Mayor Boland.
I protest.
Councilmember Culleton.
Aye with a protest.
Councilmember Jones.
Aye, under protest.
Councilmember Tryon.
aye, under protest.
And Mayor Crowder.
I under protest, and perhaps we could put it in the town.
Hey, there you go.
Just one thing on this past, just a clarification too, is on the legislation side, we're not alone. Every rural city, town in the North State is dealing with the same thing. So we are not on an island or behind throwing this out. And the SB 683 that allowed this extension, I think is kind of kicking it down the road to allow for cooler heads to prevail, to see if there's something here that's the island, that's where we're going to go legislation passed. But there is a lot of support for this to get kicked out. Red Bluff's having a tough time, Corning's having a tough time. All those cities up and down supporting us on this, so just to let you know.
Okay. Thank you.
So item 6C, consider adopting resolution number
12.
2022-12, resolution of the town council declare.
All right, good evening, council. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, Dina, could you do me a favor on it? All right, good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to bring forward this item before you for the CDBG-DR infrastructure application. So I'll go ahead and get started with, I think it's working? Okay. A broad overview of infrastructure recovery, especially 3 years removed, we can take a look back and really define 3 distinct types of projects after disaster. First being emergency opening, second being permanent restoration. And again, emergency opening is again those projects that we do to get the town back open under an evacuation order. For example, we had culverts that were melted and roadways that were undermined and guardrails to replace, and so those types of things were done. We have permanent restoration, the road rehabilitation that we're working on, the signs, the culverts, the hardscape that we've approved contracts for recently. And then again, we have the resiliency improvements, the things that we want to do to upgrade our infrastructure, to make it better, to prevent assistance, whether that's FEMA or for transportation related projects, that's FHWA, Federal Highways, Emergency Relief Program, or others. There's insurance, obviously, and then there's going to be some grant opportunities as well. Okay, and so amongst that, all 3 of those project types, we are able to identify projects. First, we're going to identify projects through damage assessment. Just like I mentioned, culverts, road rehab, signs, and sidewalks. We're going to identify projects through our plans, right? Our long-term recovery plan identified the sewer early warning station master plan is kind of a supplement, the deeper dive in project identification that was kind of chartered first by the long-term recovery plan, identifying the need to explore projects that address long dead-end roads, missing road segments, and evacuation routes. So through the transportation master plan, we have hired a great team at Mark Thomas to supplement engineering staff and do the comprehensive public outreach and really think about projects broadly and not have a cap to what should or shouldn't we come out of information in your agenda packet. But some of the initial projects through the public feedback, through the technical analysis, include the Row Road extension, Elliott Road extension, Pence Road widening, Upper Skyway widening, Upper Clark, Neal, and those types of projects. So with that, we have a massive project list, but that kind of are defined in 3 categories of their own. One being the Paradise Sewer Project. Obviously, we've had many reports about that, and there will be continued updates, but we have an unfunded need on this project for construction and design right-of-way of $182 million. This impacts all facets of recovery and is really a non-optional project for us because it benefits the environment, it benefits housing, and it's ones that we've started work on and have a match required of some sort. Some of our projects, based on the way they've worked between the state and federal funding, have small matches, 2.5% or 6.5%. Some of them have as much as 25% project matches. With that, the project sizes vary, and so some projects that doesn't equate to much, a couple of $1,000s, all the way up to our road rehab match over about $27 million for that overall $100 million effort to repave Old Town Road. So amongst those secured projects, we have a total need of $147 million of funded projects. So that's really exciting. But the last category I want to talk about, and obviously has the largest dollar amount associated with, is the unsecured project.
projects that were identified through the Transportation Master Plan, projects that are definitely of value and critical need for the town. And again, for many residents who are debating on whether or not to come back to Paradise, might be looking at these types of projects. Are we going to be able to extend LEM funded? The design hasn't started. We're not committed to anything, but it doesn't mean we don't need it. So those projects total about $580 million. So this is definitely a significant amount of funding that we've identified a need for in relation to transportation and infrastructure needs for Paradise in light of the 2018 Campfire. Enter the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Funds. In January of 2020, HUD, the Housing DR funding, that's Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Funding, are related to our disaster and one other one as well from 2018. Our disaster is 4407. These federal HUD money, or federal FEMA, I'm sorry, oh my gosh, I'm getting caught up. Federal CDBG-DR funds are allocated then to the California Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD. It's all of these acronyms. And they're our grantee that's responsible for administering the CDBG-DR funds allocated to the state. So recognize allocated $317 million of that CDBG-DR funding to go to disaster recovery infrastructure program. And so that's what we're talking about tonight. With this categorization of the CDBG-DR funds, even though it's administered by HCD at the state level, the funds have to meet the national objectives set by HUD. And that means that our infrastructure projects have to benefit local. There's some additional information here on the slide, and again in your agenda item about what constitutes an urgent need. But for the purposes of the 2018 Campfire, the creation of these funds, and just the gap in evacuation infrastructure for Paradise, and especially what we've heard in the outreach that we've done, is all of these projects are urgent for the town of Paradise to move forward and recover successfully. So tonight I'm asking council to adopt a resolution of the town council of the town of Paradise declaring certain projects critical to campfire recovery with unfunded needs for consideration in the CDBG-DR infrastructure program. We have a project list that was inputted in. We are planning on submitting for consideration of these funds. The resolution does specifically identify the project by name and the funding amount, the long-term recovery plan tier and project category, LMI project priority preference, and an urgent need priority preference as well, just in case those numbers were requested from HCD. And they also help us manage the projects for submission as well. So again, this is kind of a zoomed in view of the project summary in the full packet. I'm glad to go through any of these projects or the summary with need or an urgent need for a match project. And again, those match projects are all eligible as we've already gone through those federal processes for FEMA and FHWA funds to develop those. I should mention also, which I haven't prior to this, is hazard mitigation grant program projects are. The receiving plan is in here, other projects, I'm drawing a blank. But anyway, all of the town's project-based match needs are included in this list and are planned for submission by our team. So as far as the timeline, going all the way back to the date of the disaster and moving forward to when the funds were at first round for the CDBG-DR funds, only allowed us to submit projects which qualified as LMI, that first national objective benefiting low moderate income areas. And so those projects only included Row Road phases 1, 2, and 3. And then a couple of other minor projects, I think a Bushman Road extension and the Sawmill extension down to the new proposed Row Road. So with that, we communicate and we continue to advocate on behalf of the town and behalf of the town's priorities that just because it's the first national objective doesn't necessarily make it our highest priority. For example, our sewer project does not LMI criteria. So with that, we're here in February 2022 Round 2 is about to open again, and they are going to allow submittals for round 1 eligible projects and round 2. So we're just going to go ahead and submit all of ours again. The current funding projections I'll indicate on their website. HCD is planning on an announcement for award notifications in December of 2022. So with that, I think I'll pause here, and I'd be glad to answer any questions from the council. Just, Dina, make sure before anyone starts talking, you take them off mute. Thank you.
Hi, Mark. The time they tell us whether we're going to get any of this money or not, 4 years will have elapsed. And yet they want us to say it's an urgent need, but they don't appear to have the time and effort into trying to get us money.
Well, thank you. We've got a great team.
I want to say ditto. It doesn't sound like much, but I mean, you're not. Then what? We don't get them. Then we're back to doing this again next year? I mean, it's just.
No, so the unique part about this program is that this, to some of the insurance and the normal public assistance mechanisms, and then so once that dust has settled, what's left? What's the unfunded for the housing department and that side of the house where the other essential $700 million is going towards, and then their action plan indicates this $300 million. It is extremely challenging for us, though, for these match requirements to really know exactly if and how the match will be funded. This seems to me, besides maybe one new developing opportunity through Cal OES, funding for our committed match requirement. And so that's where, certainly our fiscal sustainability model and a lot of factors going into the long-term projection is we're asking to adopt the resolution identifying these projects as critical and urgent so we can deliver them, and then we have no alternate funds to go ahead and deliver these.
Mark, I'm just curious, if we do get the funding, do they designate it per one of these projects? Are they going to say, okay, we're funding this, this, and this? Or do they give us a block of money and we decide which of the projects at that point we go forward with?
Stage. And so we expect to submit all of this information. A lot of the NOI portion of the work you're seeing is visible in the staff report. That to see what comes back and they'd like more information on, and we'll be very excited to provide it. And as far as your question will we becoming a public paving and extending it to Skyway, for example, if that one was invited, we don't know if that project or if they are going to make some sort of apportionment allocation, which is going to allow the town to dictate and prioritize, to be determined in my mind, and we'll continue to keep you posted as the program develops.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I second.
Motion by Culleton, seconded by Jones, to approve resolution number 22-12. Vice Mayor Boland.
Aye.
Councilmember Culleton.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Always.
Item 6D, consider discussing the request for information regarding the green waste facility.
That's forward based on a discussion with an individual who was in the audience, John Ramalia, who was talking about putting together a green waste facility and was looking at making on that we were going to put out an RFI for that services. But before we could put out the RFI, we felt it was appropriate to bring the Solid Waste Committee together to meet with Northern Recycling, because a part of the franchise agreement is green waste services. Northern at the table. And what I'll do is I'm going to turn it over to them to give the report from the Solid Waste Committee about what was heard through that, and then give a recommendation on this agenda item.
And recycling, and they have an interest in putting in a green waste yard there. They are working with workforce development folks to look at the labor issue, and they're working with Kevin on staff members to look at the facility. In the franchise agreement, they still have control of that area. So at this point, the recommendation from the Solid Waste Committee is to talk through with staff. They feel that at this point, they can get a green waste yard up and running by June. And it would be open like a couple days a week for town residents. So our recommendation at this
Timeline before they can tell us, yes, this is something we're going to do.
I can answer that. So we they are able to move forward with the green waste facility at the location based on those items. So the recommendation being that it would be tabled till next month will give us time for them to investigate.
If it's all doable, that it can happen before June. The whole idea is to give the citizens an opportunity and a place to take it. And like right now, your brown can that's part of your garbage pickup service, all of that green waste, there's no place to take it other than the landfills is being hauled to Yolo County. And if we open the green waste yard, that's what'll also happen with that green waste too.
In the meantime, the county does have a bunch of free days for green waste disposal at the landfill.
Cards, Dina?
I have 2 cards on this item. The first one is from John Romelia.
Good evening. This is the rough one. Northern 3 years, they have not operated. During the previous time, they limited the size of branches to very small. They didn't have the capability to deficit. We come to today, our green waste needs are totally different than it was pre-fire. We're dealing with larger wood. You could probably leverage the money by an additional 20%, but it doesn't exist. In the franchise agreement, there is a deficiency that they need closed. They sat on it. I mean, I met with Andrew down there to talk about it. And they've sat on it. We need instances that are having to pay between $35 and $45 a ton to get rid of their logs when they can be disposed of here using moving trees. It's not fair to the contractors, it's not fair to the homeowners. They're now restricting our burning to only daylight hours, which was one way to escape these extra $1,000. And historically, the town hasn't done that. I would recommend or request that the town moves forward and without promising we're going to give it to anybody or nobody, move forward with the request for proposing a 10-day notice. And at that time, you are permitted by the contract to go out to another contractor. They've had 3 years.
Amanda Clark, I know some of you. My husband and I own and operate a tree service here in town, and I have to agree with John. We have a dire need for a green waste facility that accepts larger material. We're going to Old Durham Wood down in Durham, and we could be saving money for our clients, charging a lot less and being so much more productive and getting more jobs completed if we have to give away. We have to have somewhere to dispose of the larger material. And if Northern Recycling reopens and is still only accepting the small limbs, then we're going to be in the same boat, and all of our clients and people.
I have a quick question for you, if you don't mind.
Yes.
What is the limb size you are looking at this point? Like, are you looking at a whole tree or a larger limb size, and what would that be?
Oh, logs, up to
Got it.
2, 3.
With the Northern Recycling?
It was not.
Yeah,
That's
well,
why I asked the question.
Let me give you some information.
Yes.
The green waste yard that belongs to the town of Paradise, it's located on American Way. When it was initially operated, pre-Northern Recycling, when we had 3 garbage haulers in town, they had a chip grind operation, and they would rent the chipping machine for lots of money, would be brought up from Old Durham Wood, they would chip up the chips, and it would be sold to the cogeneration plants. Then Northern Recycling got the contract, the franchise, they took it over, they operated that, it's part of the 6 years ago, somewhere in that time period. The Water Quality Control Board came and they test all of the dirt in that area is high in iron organically. It just is. And of all the stormwater runoff, you can't have any water runoff. So at the time, they had to make a lot of improvements to continue to do that kind of operation. The town owns the property, the cost of those improvements, nobody had the money to pay for. And so posted, and he has the contracts for the wood products. The water board has shut him down on the composting side. They're also after him for stormwater runoff from the wood chips. And so that's the culprit there. I mean, the government regulations by the water, that's why even if it was open, if Northern could put the chip grinder up there and do that, they would do that. Now, the dump brings in the grinder occasionally, and they got the same issues down there. But so that's why, even if you had it open, even if you could bring something in there, that's what.
Thank you. I do think that there are options for burning. I think there's large incinerators that air quality can permit that would allow the larger material to be processed, and we wouldn't have any chip or runoff issues. But I I think we tried the curtain burners, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah, it didn't work, but Okay. I don't know why.
I believe it was staffing, because they had to be staffed 24/7. Somebody there all the time.
I think it also had something to do with the training of who was running it, and at least according to, I've talked to a couple of CAL FIRE people, and the specific procedure that you have to take with those curtain burners, and it just wasn't working and it was probably not trained staff to know how to run it, and that was a big reason that they weren't happy with it.
They've given them away. They don't even use them. They have given them away. So we talked with the fire chief, yes, there's technology out there. They work in some places. I understand they're using curtain burners in the wine country. And with that product that they get, Quality Control Board, I don't care what process you use, they're difficult to.
They'll shut you down.
Yeah, they'll shut you down.
So this has been something that we have been working on quite a while. And,
Okay.
I mean, probably ever since Northern Recycling, who actually has the franchise and for our waste, and actually has that sort of a lock on that property. It's part of their franchise agreement. This is the first time that they have come to us and said, okay, look, I did not ask them about logs, because basically what we were focused on at that point is for people who are trying to clean their lots and things like that, to get them a place where they can go and dump their green waste. So, we're more than, what is the name of your business?
All Things Trees.
All Things Trees, okay.
We would just ask that whoever's going to be operating there, or if you do put it out for multiple people to be allowed to take a look at operating over there, that they also consider the contractors, because we really are trying to help with all of this.
Got it, and thank you.
Motion to table this?
Leave that up to you. Consensus? Yeah, and so just one other thing too is for within the time period between tabling and bringing it back, we'll have legal also look at the franchise agreement, because if there's a contractor that's wanting to come back to bring a green waste yard and put it in the industrial area and it's a private property, there's less complications than trying to bring it and put it on public property. That is the consensus to push out the RFI, that we're looking at all of the components of that. If the council was to decide to give it to a private party, how that would be handled within the franchise agreement. So consensus on tabling would be great.
How,
I agree.
I agree.
Okay.
Don't don't want to twist your arm or nothing. I mean,
Okay, 6E on an RV, and I think Susan has updates for us.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Crowder. Good evening again, council. So this agenda item regarding an exceptions committee application for 63A brought back in February to give the applicant the opportunity to get a contract executed with Rancho Engineering for their building plans and get those plans submitted. January 11th was last month's meeting where this item was deferred until the February council meeting. On January 31st, so that was last Monday, staff had a conversation with Rancho Engineering, just checking status. He did indicate that the applicant had responded immediately after the council meeting, signed the contract, and they were working on preparing those building plans. So we talked about what the deadline was, and he was doing his best to have those plans done to give the applicant the opportunity to submit. As of yesterday, the rebuild plans were completed by Rancho Engineering and given to the applicant. There was a correction that needed to be made on the site plan that was brought back to Rancho's attention today. So when staff spoke with Rancho Engineering at 2 o'clock today, they had wrapped up those corrections so they could return that site plan to the applicant, which only would have left a very small window of about 2 hours to get them submitted to the town. But the big steps are completed now, and the applicant is here tonight if council would like to hear some more about what the intent is for the application.
I'd like to ask a question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Susan.
He's gone.
He was here.
Okay.
So Susan,
Did we bore him?
Yes, sir.
yeah, it was all the financial stuff. He's got the plans, he talked to Rancho, the plans are being, I mean, did you
These
get
were the
indicate-
really big steps. So to get the contract to pay for these plans to be prepared, he did the things he was asked, and I can understand if the applicant just got them back yesterday and recognized a correction. When I talked to Rancho, we're working on that today. I feel as if he has given it a very good try to get in time. I mean, he couldn't have submitted any sooner. And so tonight, one of the options might be is just give staff a hard deadline, the RV, or we hold the original deadline.
I think we need to be honoring to Rancho for, he went through hoops to do what he did.
Yes, he didn't realize that council had given that hard deadline time.
And my comment is only that,
Right. And he's done, it seems like this is a lot of steps for somebody to have gone to not finish it out.
yeah, it's not about, I mean, if he's gone this far, I mean, you know.
Do you?
Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm really impressed. There's a lot to look at. And once they start construction, some things are too late. So I'm okay if he takes 2 weeks to submit them.
Good.
Okay.
I think that's, the meeting rolls around and nothing has happened.
But this
you-
doesn't, this can't stop at just submission. He's got to submit, and then it's usually about 3 weeks to get him out. He needs to postpone. It needs to take the next steps also.
Right.
I'm not
I
trying to
agree
be
with that.
hard or anything, but that's.
Yeah, but
this-
when you submit your plans, right, for approval, for a
They
permit.
could sit there and submit them.
No, I granted, but you gotta spend some money, you gotta write a pretty hefty check.
Yeah.
It's not like you just turn them in and then it was thousands of dollars that I had to pay
Totally
just to
agree.
have plans checked.
I do it every day. I almost
Well,
every day.
you know what
I
I'm saying,
know.
I mean, if he's
I
done
know.
that, I don't see where they're gonna, I get what you're saying, yeah, there are
It's-
some people.
We got to put the next step.
But just
I
let,
mean, anybody who submits them and then picks them up. I guess, what are you saying, like?
I'm saying if you want to go 2 weeks, that's fine. I think Friday's enough time to submit them. Then he has, like I said, it's usually about 3 weeks. I don't see much more unless there's comments. Just because he has plans, that's the easy part. I'm telling you, that's the easy part. I know there's money in it. That's the easy part. We need to move forward. So I'm just saying, let's make sure we keep moving, or else we have someone sitting there that's still not doing anything.
if he has plans, right, he just has to go ahead and pull that permit. I mean, we don't have anything in the temporary use permit or our normal ordinance that says you have to have a
I'm not saying we-
signed
I
contract.
think you
What if
have,
he's an owner
you have
builder?
3 years, don't you? Once you pull the permit?
1 year.
1 year?
They can be extended if you're making progress.
This permit, is
I'm
that what we're
comfortable with
looking at?
that.
Yeah.
I am too, and I don't, I mean, I get what Greg's saying, but, I mean, unless every single
He could be owner builder, I don't have a problem with that, I'm just saying, it's gotta move forward. You gotta keep going, so, if you're okay with pulling the permit by the next meeting, that's great. And that should be able to happen.
Well, I think Jody said 2 weeks, I'm good with 2 weeks.
Falls under the regular temp
right.
use ordinance.
That's right.
Right. So I think what we're saying is he needs to pull the permit before the next meeting, or it comes back to us.
Okay. Okay,
Thanks.
With that.
thank you.
Do we need a vote on that, or?
Yes, please. Recommended approval provided by Exceptions Committee Member Culleton and authorize staff to accept and process the temporary use permit application from the applicant as long as they,
No, he won't need a temporary use permit.
Under a different deal.
okay,
But aren't we extending, oh, no, okay.
okay. So
We're
we
just saying we're not gonna sick code enforcement on him in the meantime.
Yeah.
This is item number to give direction that by the next meeting, he has to have made the application and pulled the permit by the next meeting. Otherwise, it comes back
It comes back for
to the council at
abatement.
the next meeting. for
Discuss where we're at.
consideration.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
That was what you eloquently stated.
Right.
Understood,
I
thank
can't believe
you.
there's any question.
All right, roll call vote. Vice Mayor Boland,
Aye.
Councilmember Culleton,
Aye.
Councilmember Jones,
Aye.
Councilmember Tryon,
Aye.
and Mayor Crowder.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan.
Thank you,
Council,
Susan, appreciate it. Well,
Greg?
Agenda, future, well, okay, your future's next, I'm sorry. Committee, with LAFCO, we made it through the Tuscan Water District formation. Oh, my goodness. From those people, and, yeah, that was quite a feat in itself, but anyway, Steve Lucas did a great job on it, his staff did a great job. So that's behind us, and hopefully we can discuss other things, but really nothing, not really. Sounded good. It's you, Jody.
I went to the Consolidated Oversight Board. That's the board that oversees the successor agencies to the redevelopment agencies. Normally, it's the Paradise ROPS on the agenda, and it was approved. It was a little controversial because initially Butte County staff recommended that it be rejected, but they changed their recommendation prior to the meeting, and it was approved. I also went to the BCAG meeting, grant to look at extending rail service. The agency that runs the San Joaquins and the train service over the Altamont is looking at, want to extend north from there either to Chico or Oroville. So they're partnering with BCAG to do the study that would lay the groundwork for extending that train service, which would provide service to the airport for our population, not directly, but from the station in North Daytona. So I think that's kind of an exciting thing that BCAG is doing. There was one other, and then the sewer, the Regional Sewer Committee with the City of Chico, progress is, I think, exceptional. It's been amazing. The whole process, we're making a lot of progress. We're getting toward the end. I think within maybe our next 2 meetings, we'll have all of those principles agreed to. So that's my report.
I went to actually 2 solid waste committees meetings. Yeah, we did 2 of them. And then I also attended Air Quality Management Board. I'll be on the Fire Safe Council and Town of Paradise check-in meeting. I think those are very useful meetings for the 2 of us to sort of get together and bounce around ideas. I also attended the goat grazing festival committee. They've set a date, and I apologize to all of you. I left my phone at home, and so I don't have the date for you, but I can certainly get it for you. And so I hooked in California Women, our local California Women for Agricultural chapter. They'll be helping out with that. And then also our Butte County Farm Bureau is also participating on that. And then just for kicks and giggles, I went to the LAFCO meeting to see how it went with the Tuscan Water District. Congratulations to them. And that's it.
At museum and attend District Attorney Mike Ramsey handed over the hook that broke that started the campfire, as well as some cross pieces and what have you, which was something that when all of us that went through it are no longer here, our kids need to know what happened, what was Paradise like before, and the museum's going to have that preserved for it, so that's a great thing. I mean, the cooperation we're getting with the city of Chico is tremendous. I think it's going really well, and like her, I'm optimistic that in the next couple of meetings, we will have the. I attended a Zoom conference, the Consortium of Real Estate people were here and did quite an extensive survey of what to help us recover. It's a long report. Do we have it on our?
I don't know if I did send it out in a weekly update, I think on the last Friday. So but it's on their website. I can send a link off.
So there were some good suggestions and what have you. So it was nice of them to prepare that. I got to do a tour with Dee Dee Myers. We toured Paradise and Magalia. She is now the Economic Development Director interested in what our community, well, the whole Campfire area. So, asked what we could need, so hopefully something will come out of that. And put together, and the Chamber of Commerce was there. Not that anything's settled, but they had a lot of their upper management there, and they are assuring us that they are still, it will definitely not look like the old hospital looked, but like I said, we have no timetable and no firm commitment, with the exception that they are still looking and that's about the extent of mine. So, town manager report.
We have a future agenda item.
Oh, sorry.
I remember right after the fire, FEMA told us, they said, there's some things that are critical if you're gonna have your town back or not. One was schools and churches. You get those up and running as quickly as possible and get people back into churches and into schools. Dates, we need to start moving on this, or we need to get someone else that will commit to coming up here and being a part of this town. We have enough people, we have enough here, and I'm not excited about Adventist Health just dragging their feet. That's one thing I hear, emergency help or anything where people can walk in at night, so.
And I did tell them, we need an answer one way or the other, because if not them.
Insurance is, people are having a tough time getting insurance for their homes. They want to build, just had one gal in her office that wants to move up, and she got to everything, and then she got the insurance, and she said, it killed the deal for me. I couldn't do it. I had to get the county, and this is something for future, we got to get the county working around our town as to what they're doing. They can't just sit on the sideline and say, well, we're not doing nothing. That's what brought the fire into our town, was everything around us. What are they doing to help us with that defensive things that's going to shut us down if we don't address those in the near future?
So I got an email from one of the gals from DOI, Department of Insurance, and I worked with Kevin and staff to get all of our mitigation documents together. So I'm going to try to contact them within this next week and say, hey, you know, town is taken care of. And so hopefully maybe we can.
And I hope they can do that, and the state might have to step in and help with some of the high-end exposure that they have. But what's weird is when you can have a house in one spot, you can look over to a house right over here, and they can get insurance as cheaper than they got it before the fire. I mean, it's right there. It's walking distance from this house. But this house is in a zone. That house is not in that same zone. Well, give me a break. I mean, that's principal space. Are you doing the right things? If you are, you should be rewarded for that. If you're not, then you should have a problem getting insurance. But this zone thing is just, so they've got to look at it differently than what they're looking at.
And some of these companies are still looking at the older maps with the,
Yes, they
you
are.
have too much vegetation around you. So it's kind of ridiculous.
The Performing Arts Center, we just got a notice of non-renewal. They renewed us in 2019, 2020, 2021, you know, and like, it's a metal building, survived the fire. I sent them aerial photos, surrounded by parking lot.
From said, that's the best bet in the world to go up there and do an insurance. There's nothing to burn. I call them, or these other people call them, we're not doing insurance up there anymore. In 1 year, they went from excited about it to not doing insurance no more. We gotta look at it. It's gotta be something brought up.
I'm being told it's the underwriter, that the insurance company buys insurance from, those are the people that are not, they're saying, no, we're not going to Paradise.
I think
It's crazy.
it feels like some of it is that they waited a period of time so they didn't appear to be the bad guys. And now they feel that there's been enough time so they can, because even insurance rates have gone up. Even insurance.
So what's your report, anything?
My report.
Let's get out of there.
I hear you. Really quickly, citizen involvement. Out, talk to your constituents, talk to your people, tell them to go out and fill these things out. Push them to there. If you're hearing that they can't get on the website, they need a written survey, come to us. We'll do a written survey. We are really trying our best to make sure that we're connected. Facebook, we do the website. We're trying to get out there as much as possible to people. So help us get out there. If you see something that we're not doing well on the citizen involvement, let us know. We'll make those changes. Federal advocacy. We're hoping that if that is passed, we have been assured that our police radio ask will be funded. So that's $660,000 that will be available for police radios to move forward with that project.
Will that tie them into Butte County?
That does tie them into Butte County, correct. Yep, it gets them all up to speed on all of the, whatever the newest and greatest thing is. State advocacy, we talked about the ask moving forward on the SB 1383. We all SB1 funds are based on population. We lost our population. We are going to lose our SB1 funds next month or next year. And so what we're doing is working with the Cal Cities. Cal Cities is putting together a spreadsheet that shows the loss of those revenues associated with our population and then the increase with the population going to SB1 funds for us to be able to continue to maintain the roads. And then on insurance, we are still working through the insurance side of things. We are having issues with multifamily insurance. Luckily, our contractors are being able, but our insurance, the CRC grant that we got, the Community Resiliency Grant that we got for community-based insurance will be kicking off here, I believe, next month. I will be in the grant. Once that grant gets kicked off, we are going to hit the ground running and look to develop models that make sense to insurance brokers, right? So to kind of meld those two together with council member. And lastly, it's been 3 years, and I did attend the city managers conference in Monterey this last week. But we're still on the forefront of these asks, to continue to keep it in the forefront of their mind that, I keep telling them between response and recovery is not quick. You are in response mode for a long. So I'm encouraging you and myself, if there's an opportunity to speak, take it. Get out there. If you need help with it, we'll help you. I'm putting down at the Capitol in May, and I'm asking to be one of the speakers because I want our voice to be heard about the needs we have going forward. The Government Finance Officers Association, which is a national organization, has asked to speak in Austin in June. 3 years behind our belt, we have lessons learned. We can not only support new communities, but we can show the need moving forward. So with that, I'm going to continue to take those opportunities to move forward.
Can I ask you a question?
You can.
Okay, so when you go to these things and you talk to them, what is the possibilities? It's encouraging that we're still in the forefront of people's minds out there. What's the possibility of taking what Cal OES and FEMA did and what they do now, their SOP now? Is there any opportunity to go back and ask them, through legislators, or say, look at, now that you do it this way,
Yeah.
there's a big mess you left over there.
Yeah, and that would be through the federal side of things. And I'll give you the short answer. The efficiencies that were gained through other disasters is the other disaster was the learning curve, and the next ones get a better opportunity. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to stop at that. I'm just saying that's normally how it's worked. So I will ask that question to on our federal side.
What they actually learned. So now they're doing something that
Yep.
makes good sense, best practices.
Yeah, I agree.
So we got all these dead trees like that.
Right.
If nothing else, give us some money.
Insurance commissioner back after the Dixie Fire was kind of out is what do you think this, and that hadn't hit the market yet. And I'm wondering if the Dixie Fire and the threat of Tahoe.
The Calder Fire.
Yep. And because that even went to one of the conference sessions was with Ryan Burris, who is with Cal OES. He talked about that when that big concern there, and there's a lot of money there, and I think they realized that these fires now are they have their mind of their own. They're not going to pinpoint a poor community versus a wealthy community, and so I'm thinking there's a trickle-down effect that there's a knee-jerk reaction from the move forward. I'm not saying it's right, but I think that we can, if that's the picture that we're painting, we can paint our own picture with our own
So
story.
how do we get out of the wooey? Because
We're not going to get out of the
there's no
way.
forest here, but we're not anymore. It's not that anymore.
Well, that's true, but you're not going to get out of the WUI standard.
Yeah.
That's a standard that we're going to still build to.
But maybe out of the woo
No, no,
insurance.
WUI insurance, right.
But I mean, the fact that we're designated,
Right.
high.
You going and talking to these groups and doing this stuff,
Yeah.
I don't know how you have the energy to do all of it sometimes. But I appreciate it, your enthusiasm. This is taxing, and you just seem to be